Welcome, viewers. You're back to your program, Politics with KO, and that's dedicated to the Chibok girls. We hope you're going to come back home to be part of the new Nigeria. I've got with me in the studio Natreema Adjaye. You're welcome.
Thank you for having me this evening.
So, yeah, you were very uncomfortable about coming on this program. So it was going to be hot, isn't it?
Oh, well, I know it's controversial.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
so this is the segment where we try to promote young people.
Right.
And when we see anyone doing nice things, Afro-Brit,
Right.
we are happy. So tell our viewers what you do.
Oh, I'm an author.
Yeah.
I've just released a book called Melanin Monologues, A Black British Perspective. It was published in March of this year. So at the moment, I'm plugging that, I'm promoting it around London and hopefully outside of London. I'll be doing more.
So tell me, when did you start writing?
Well, I got the idea 2 years ago when I saw a documentary that was broadcast on Oprah Winfrey's network called Dark Girls. And the African-American girls in the program were just talking about having a dark complexion and how that's affected them. And I thought it'd be very interesting to give a British perspective on that.
Wow. So you were born in the UK?
Yes, I was born in South London.
What heritage? Ghana?
My parents are from Ghana.
Okay, so you just felt it was important to now speak about being black in Britain.
Exactly, because I think it's a subject that I don't feel people, from my perspective, from a dark-skinned perspective, I don't feel like that story's been told.
Okay. So do you get this, let me ask, I've asked this question over and over again. Right. Will you call yourself British or you call yourself a Ghanaian? Do you have those conflicts? I
don't have the conflicts. My culture is like a hybrid, it's both. I'm very much British, but I'm very Ghanaian because when people see you in this world, they treat you and discriminate against you, embrace you based upon what they see. And when you see me, you see an African woman. But this is in the book, Melanin Monologues, and I address that issue. Okay,
so now this monologue, right, in what form did it take place? Is it like a prose or it's just...
I'm glad you asked me that. You're the first person who's ever asked me.
I'm a bit intelligent.
Yes, you are very. It's a mixture of poetry and prose.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be nagging people, so I thought I'll mix it up, put some poetry in there, make it interesting. And sometimes a poem was the best way to summarize an experience.
Okay, so I know about spoken words.
Right.
And I know the spoken words culture is catching up in the UK. Yeah. And one of my favorite person in that is a Nigerian lady. She's based in the US and she does it so well. Now, does that mix into the way you write? Do you get influence from artists who like spoken words?
I'm inspired by everything I see. I'm particularly inspired by black people who get the black Africans, West Indians, Americans who get the opportunity to enter the mainstream because the world watches them and believes that they're a representation of all of us.
And you're in the first black ethnic minority station in Europe, Ben TV.
I'm so pleased to be here.
So it's not a coincidence that you're on this program, and that's why we think it's important we promote our people. And the world, our people is the world, white, black, Asian,
exactly.
But it's more important that we protect the interests of oppressed people. Now, tell me about your experience growing up in the UK.
Oh my gosh, my experience. It's, what I want to just emphasize is the Melanin Monologues, my book, is not critical, it's observational. So it's not pointing my finger at any particular group. But what I feel is, as a black person in Europe, particularly a very, very dark-skinned black person, I've been educated about race. My experience of race is multi-tiered.
Okay.
It's the racism I've experienced from outside of the black community, from other races, and it's the prejudice I've experienced in the black community because my skin is darker. And when
so the darker you are, the more likely?
Oh, yeah. When I was growing up, it was pretty
tell me
tough.
about the experience. I'm not particularly interested about the prejudice within the black community, if there's racism that takes place within.
I can't say racism because I think racism is about power.
Yeah.
I'll say prejudice more so. And it was being in primary school, there were black students. And when I went to school, I knew I was a black person, but I didn't realize what type of black person I was. It's when I went to school I realized black is a big category, but it's very, very, very segregated. It was people from the West Indies, people from Africa, people from Ghana, people from Nigeria, people light, people dark. And it was when I got into the school environment and I was criticized for having a very dark complexion, I realized that I was a bit of an outsider.
If I tell you to do something for us based on your experience and your writing, can you do that for us?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
yeah. Go for it. And I hope my producer is going to just focus on my guest, Natreema. Let's have it.
Okay. Thank you for asking me to quote something.
Yeah.
What I'm going to quote is a very short poem-ish called Melanin Freestyle.
Yeah.
It just summarizes my experience. Okay. When I first started school, I knew I was ugly. It was when all the kids started to tease me. My skin was too dark and everybody was light. They laughed and compared me to the shade of midnight. My hair was short and kinky. It wouldn't seem to grow. My lips were too thick, much like my wide nose. I was ashamed to be black. I didn't have any pride. The shame of it all tore me up inside. When I came of age, I then started to see the greatness of black. I learnt my history. I descended from a land that civilized the earth. I knew my black was a gift and no longer a curse. Take a look at black ancestry. Brothers were ruling as kings, sisters were regal as queens. Stolen, our thrones were left empty. The transatlantic abduction destroyed our families. The motherland became a distant memory. Slavery made us deny our once great ancestry. Some were strong and kept Africa alive. There were others who crumbled. They were truly traumatized. Without recognition of ourselves and a fragmented history, our culture was compromised because we had no legacy. Adopting ways of life so different from our own, forced to take on other names and domesticated roles.
These are powerful words, and you developed this. You were born in the UK. You still develop that connection with Africa. Now, do you ever visit Africa?
Yes, I've visited Ghana many times.
Yeah. So when you go back to, now we've talked about the prejudice within the black community in the UK. In Ghana, it must be different. Even I left Nigeria as an adult person, and even when I go back home now, I've got thick Nigerian accent, and they still say to me, you're behaving like someone who lives abroad. Now, I was not born in the UK. Do you get that kind of prejudice even back home in Ghana? Is there like a conflict, or do you feel welcome?
You do stand out. I feel welcome in Ghana.
Yeah.
I would even say to some degree I do feel welcome in Britain. It's just isolated incidents and you have to take a stance. But I'm glad you mentioned going back to Africa, because I went to Ghana for the first time when I was 6 years old. And because I was bullied at school about being African, when my mother took me there as a young child, I got the chance to see that Africa wasn't as negative or as poverty-stricken as it was portrayed on TV.
So you didn't see people living on trees?
Absolutely not. And it was powerful because I got, you know, we see Barack Obama as president now and it doesn't faze us.
Yes.
But when you're from Africa, you've grown up in Africa, all powerful people are black. Your president, your mayor, your teachers. Yeah. So that was eye-opening.
Yeah. So what would you say to young people like you? In the UK, we've got black on black violence, gun crime, knife crime. We've lost a lot of members of our communities to this violence from within the community. You know, how can people tap into the positive actions people like you do? What can make the difference?
For me, what makes a difference is self-esteem. When you realize the kind of legacy we have and what we come from, and you understand your history, which isn't really taught to you in mainstream schools, you understand you have a responsibility. And even though things seem hard now, there were people who lived in the 50s when there were issues with civil rights who managed to, you know, achieve great things.
Do you follow British politics?
I do.
Okay.
You can't avoid it.
You can't avoid it. Now, okay, which of the black British politicians would you say impress you?
I like David Lammy.
Okay, I don't like David Lammy.
I do, but you know, it's hard because when you're a black British, I like them all to some degree, because when you're black, when you're in a minority, not just black, if you're gay or if you're from somewhere else, people make you, when you're in an environment where everybody else is different, you become the ambassador. So they've got a big responsibility. They have to deal with politics, and then they have to deal with being a representative of a small minority.
I'll put in a very difficult. How about Diane Abbott?
I admire her because she came out at a time.
First black.
Yes, and
female.
even and this is why I said self-esteem. Even for Diane Abbott, because who was her predecessor? Nobody.
Nobody, yeah.
So for her to one day sit down and say, okay, I'm going to do this, you know, she makes mistakes. We all do.
Yeah, and if I ask you also, would you consider going into politics? Would you encourage young people to tap going into politics? Because literature is powerful.
Yes.
You know, huge voice. You would inspire people, but power is where you make that change.
Would I go into politics? It's funny you should ask me that, because in 2007, I graduated with a master's degree in political communications. Yeah. So the original plan was to pursue a degree in politics, but I started working and things changed. But I am passionate about people, so maybe in the future.
Okay. Adjaye is a Ghanaian name.
Adjaye.
Adjaye. Okay, what does it mean, Adjaye?
Adjaye. Well, my full surname is Natreema Adjaye. Okay. But as life happened and I started working places, people used to just drop the Asaful because, oh, it's too long. But it's actually that Natreema A, the A is Asaful Adjaye.
Okay, now let's go back. In Ghana, there's going to be elections, you know, coming up, I think this year or next year, if I'm not wrong. And when you look at Ghana compared to other parts of Africa, where do you place Ghana at this moment in time?
Do you know, I think Ghana is one of the countries, and this is not to criticize any other West African country. We all have something brilliant to bring to the table in and outside of Africa. But Ghana's been one of those countries that have been credited for being quite peaceful. We've been very fortunate. We've accommodated some people from neighboring countries, but Ghana will just keep, like its neighboring countries, Togo and Nigeria, it will just keep growing. A lot more. I want to encourage people like myself to go home and invest in Africa, because people from Asia and Europe are going to our countries. It's very lucrative and profitable. People should consider a career.
And let's talk about black businesses in the UK, especially in London. Are they doing well? Do you think black business are doing the right thing? You go to some of these restaurants and you go like, I'm not going to ever come back here if I go to wait 3 hours for food when I can get it in a few minutes. Do you think they should do better? I think there's always room for improvement. Okay.
But I think when you are a black business, you have to accept the responsibility
I've got to let you go now.
Thank you.
Natreema Adjaye, thank you so much. Viewers, we've come to the end of today's program. We'll see you next Thursday. Time, gosh, our enemy. See you next Thursday. Politics with KO. Out of the confusion that we have in Lagos is also the political